Hi, everyone. Welcome to our broadcast about fertility and egg freezing, especially during the COVID-19 crisis. And we want to help answer all your questions. And I'm here today with Brittany and Catherine from Elanza Wellness. I'm Valerie Landis from Experience.com and Eggology Club podcast, and we're here to help answer all your questions about fertility. You know, this is a very interesting time that we're all living in, and you probably have a lot of built up anxiety or questions about what you do during this pandemic for your fertility. So we're here to help. Catherine, do you want to start with some questions that we have?
Sure. Sorry, we're just all cracking up a bit here. I think this coronavirus crisis is causing a bit of a rush on internet services everywhere. But Valerie, if you can still hear me, one of the first questions out of everyone's mouths when it comes to egg freezing, out of everyone we speak to and questions that we get sent in, is does it hurt? Which is a fair enough question to ask.
Yeah, you know, there are a lot of drugs and medications you take during your fertility cycle when you embark on egg freezing. It's really the first half of IVF. So, patients that are going through IVF actually experience a very similar protocol to women that are egg freezing. And so, it can be made up of 2 to 3 shots a night, and everybody's pain tolerance is different. So it's a hard question to answer point blank about whether or not egg freezing hurts, but there are ways to minimize it. So for me personally, like I would ice pack the portion of my belly where I would stick the needle into and do the injections. And then I also tried putting the injections in my thigh, which was a different experience. That's another delivery method that you can use for delivering the hormones. And so that was a little less painful if you're easy to bruise, which I'm very easy to bruise. So, you know, at times it was just like you couldn't put one more shot in your stomach, right? So that's where like the thigh or even the side shoulders, those are all great areas that you can use to minimize some of the hurt. But I really think the trick on the medication side when you're taking your hormones for 2 weeks, because you do take about 3 or 4 shots a night, depending on your protocol, is to ice it before you inject it. Also, there's a couple of medications that are really good to make sure you kind of take it out of the refrigerator for a little while before injecting as well. That helps so it doesn't sting as much. But
and when it comes the actual process, the procedure itself, that's mostly conducted under sedative, isn't it? And so you shouldn't actually feel anything when the needle goes into
the day of retrieval. You get to go under. It's kind of like a mini cocktail, and you have a light sedation where you won't feel anything. In fact, you really won't remember anything that happens during that 15 minutes that you're out and collecting the eggs, which is nice because then you can just recover. Now, there is a little bit of recovery after the procedure, and everyone is different, and depending on which trigger shot you get could depend on your recovery after the retrieval. So I always suggest that you increase your intake on electrolyte water, and it helps the bloating subside. Also, heat packs are really, really effective and can help with kind of minimizing those PMS symptoms after retrieval. But yeah, those are really great questions and a big fear for people, because if you've never, stuck yourself with needles before, if you're not diabetic, it's really foreign.
And there's quite a bit of variety as well, because personally, I didn't find a problem with the injections, but just a couple of days before actually having the retrieval, when everybody feels bloated, for me, it wasn't so much pain as just quite a lot of discomfort. But luckily for most women, that seems to be as far as it goes. But like anything, there's a minority of people that do really struggle with it for whatever reason.
Yeah. Britt, did you have pain?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I have PCOS, which is polycystic ovarian syndrome, and I had quite a few eggs, and for me, it wasn't painful. It was totally fine in the time leading up to the procedure. After the procedure, because I had more eggs, my ovaries were just swollen, basically a part of pee. It was, but this felt extremely uncomfortable, probably more than most people. But I think that if you are somebody that does have PCOS, that is just kind of something that you might expect, because it took me probably 3-4 days to feel truly back to normal.
Yeah, that's a really great point. PCOS is a pretty severe issue, and a good reason to egg freeze if you have PCOS, because you need to protect your family future with egg freezing or cryopreservation.
And speaking of that, kind of protecting our futures, and that's what everyone's paying out for or considering paying out for when it comes to egg freezing. Another question that's really commonly asked, and Britt, maybe you can jump in on this one, is how likely is it to actually work?
That seems like a very important question when you're trying to figure out whether or not to do it, of course. No, it's not one that's really, there's not a one-size-fits-all answer, because it really depends on how old you are when you freeze and the sort of like number of eggs that you retrieve. So what we kind of just need to take one quick step back and look at how age and fertility are intertwined. I won't go into full detail, but they matter when it comes to how you consider it freezing. So if you look at this chart, I know it might be hard to see, but generally speaking, your chance of a live birth goes down and your chance of a miscarriage goes up with every single year, especially around the sort of 30s is when it really starts to decline. So when it comes to will it work, it's really important to just consider when you freeze, because if you look at yourself, you look at your life plan, maybe 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and actually a really important thing is maybe you don't want one child, you want 2, or 3. So what age do you think will be when you want to have those children? So then when you look at that age, you also kind of have to understand what your fertility might look like. And, everyone is different, of course, but the best indicator we have is age. So when you look at your chances there, then you have to compare that to what they are right now. So what we do know is actually fascinating is that almost 100% of fertility or your chance of having a healthy baby is completely related to the quality of the egg. Mm-hmm. So if you're basically preserving your higher quality eggs at a younger age, your likelihood of success will be basically the same rate which you froze them, if that makes sense. So there's a lot of, it really depends on your own life plan and what your natural chances are in the future. Of course, you can try to do IVF, which is basically the extended version of egg freezing, which you actually implant the eggs that are retrieved and fertilized. But in IVF, if you don't freeze your eggs, then you use the eggs that you would have at that age. In effect, increasing your odds, but you can't reverse the age of your eggs. So I know it's quite an interesting way of looking at it.
So I guess kind of like it can work in that the technology, the science behind it has been shown to work. If you freeze an egg and then you thaw it, you fertilize it, that can lead to a live, healthy baby.
Yeah, we've actually been doing that with egg donors for quite some time. And I think that's a good point to make, that when you freeze at a younger age, then you increase your odds that egg will turn into a live birth. I think it's between 2 and 12% per egg, depending on your age. So it's a good factor to think about if you're considering egg freezing, to think about it when you're younger instead of waiting past 35 or 40. That's a little bit harder. You need more eggs then, and you have to do egg math in order to make the numbers work.
I think, and I think that it's really just important to make sure that it's very clear that this is just a preventative measure. Mm-hmm. There's no guarantee. So while it might provide you an extra chance, it's really not surefire. The only way to ensure that you will 100% have one live birth is if you were to do an exorbitant number of cycles and freeze an outrageous number of eggs. That is the only way. But generally speaking, the average number of cycles per egg freezing patient is 1.2. So there is a likelihood that you might have to do multiple cycles in order to achieve higher likelihood of success in the future. But either way, there's no guarantee.
Good point.
Much like natural conception. So basically, there's no guarantee that your frozen eggs will lead to a baby, but what is guaranteed is that they should give you a higher chance than if you were using your older eggs.
Right. It's about giving you options.
Exactly.
And I think that's what this does, is it extends the biological clock and allows you to have more time to figure it out and not have to rush any of these decisions. Catherine, there have been a lot of feedback and questions about, like, how does this affect your health? And does this cause cancer? Does fertility treatments cause cancer? Do you want to take that question on?
Yeah, we also get that question quite a lot from people. And, just to reassure people, first off, every single fertility doctor that we've ever spoken to has said no. So this kind of hasn't come out of nowhere. There was some data a few years ago that suggested a link between cancer and people undergoing ovarian stimulation. So that's basically taking hormones to stimulate your ovaries to mature more eggs. So that's done before the egg freezing cycle or before IVF. So a lot of the studies were around IVF. But what they found since then is that actually it was just correlation, not causation. Mm-hmm. And they thought that many people undergoing ovarian stimulation were doing so because they needed fertility treatment. And a lot of people who needed fertility treatment already were predisposed to be more likely to have cancer, was one of the thinking. So let's say people who are obese are more likely to get cancer and also more likely to need fertility treatment. And another reason for that, what looked like a link in the data, is something that they called surveillance bias, which is basically people going through fertility treatment get so many scans and blood tests, and they get so tightly monitored by their doctors that they figured they were actually detecting cancers a little bit more in that population than in regular women. Mm-hmm. So that was one of the reasons. Having said that, so first off, no fertility doctor we've spoken to says there's any link between doing egg freezing and getting cancer. But there's just one exception there, which is that if somebody already has particular types of cancers, and they're, let's say, estrogen responsive cancers that are exacerbated by hormones in the system, then those people might not be good candidates for egg freezing or for taking hormones. So that's something someone would have to talk to their fertility doctor about very carefully, because if they already had cancer, it could perhaps make the cancer grow faster.
Yeah, but a lot of cancer patients actually seek cryopreservation before their treatment. So it is safe to undergo and do, and they have special hormones and treatments, cycles that you can embark on for a faster cycle and expedite the process. Yeah, so good question.
Modify the cycle. And actually, speaking about that, maybe we should dig into that, Valerie. It's, what is the process like in normal circumstance, start to finish? What does it look like?
Yeah, so there's a little bit of prep before your hormone treatment starts. I like to say that, monitoring your personal health, increasing your activity levels, your workouts, your vitamin intake, all that stuff is really important. And you guys have a really great app that we're offering everyone for free. So during the Corona times, you're free to download the Elanza Wellness app and start your fertility journey today. And so, but once you've gotten, your health in order, you'll need your OBGYN, regular pap smear. You'll need your STD, STI testing. So it's very important that we are disease free, because we're banking our eggs and putting them in cryo tanks. And so you'll want to clear up any potential sexually transmitted infections, and if there is any, hopefully there won't be. And then you'll get the all clear from your doctor that your hormone levels and everything are ready for this cycle. And so on day 2 of your period, or day 2, day 3 of your period, usually is when you start your injections. And so you'll come in for your pre-scans and begin the workup, the makeup, the baseline. And then you take hormones for 2 weeks, and that's where you're injecting yourself every night. And then usually in week 2, you have a shot in the morning, or to prevent you from ovulating. And then based on your scans and how you're progressing through your cycle and how big your ovaries and your follicles are getting, they're going to tell you when to take your trigger shot. And that trigger shot then 36 hours later prepares you for retrieval. And so when you go under, then you're able to extract all your eggs. And then you have the recovery process, and then hopefully your period starts within a week or 2 weeks after the retrieval, and you can get back to your normal daily activities and cycle.
Cool, that's a very good overview, thanks. And Britt, maybe out of that process, we were talking a bit about, does it work before, and it kind of depends on the number of eggs. So in that process that Valerie's just been talking about, how many eggs would somebody be hoping to have retrieved?
It's also, you gave me all the hard questions. There's also no one answer with that. I think Valerie mentioned the term egg mass, and that's really what you kind of have to calculate, because again, it comes back to age and how many eggs you retrieve. Because as you might retrieve eggs when you're older, and if that's the case, then to maintain the same outcome, the same level of success, would need to freeze more eggs. So again, we go back to the little charts in the book, and you kind of have to do a little bit of math yourself, like we talked about. So for example, if you are 37 at the age of freezing, which is a pretty average age to be freezing, you're going to have an average of 12 mature eggs. Again, that is an average. You could have many, like myself with PCOS, or you could have 2. It totally depends. But even that at age 37 with 12 eggs, and 12 eggs is a pretty decent number, that only gives you a 56% chance of a live birth. So then we get into doing multiple cycles. And, it can be really difficult. We have a lot of women who have read the book and are participating in our fertility program. And it can be really upsetting to feel like you didn't get enough eggs. And, I'd say the best advice I can give there is that just prepare for the worst, and if you really, really want to have a biological child, plan on doing 2 cycles. Plan on maybe 3 cycles. But again, it's all about expectations and, just knowing those numbers beforehand, because the last thing you want to do is think that I did 1 cycle, I got 10 eggs, 12 eggs, and then you only have a 56% chance of working. So really it's about kind of using this math. I would definitely say beforehand, so you know what to expect and you don't kind of overextend what you think you can accomplish.
Britt,
so basically, for example,
another really great tip too is having that discussion with your doctor based on your baseline scans and saying, hey, listen, I think I really want 3 children. So what are my odds of getting 3 children from these eggs? Or maybe you have conceived naturally for the first one, but just having the discussion on how hard you're going to push this cycle. I froze 3 times, and each cycle was incredibly different from the previous cycle. And so while we get fixated on the number of eggs, it's really quality over quantity. And so if you were to get 5 really quality eggs, mature level 2 eggs, that's way better than getting 12 or 15 immature eggs, or a mature level 1 egg. And so it's about quality over quantity too.
Yeah,
I think, Valerie, you bring up an interesting point on, I think we should kind of just clarify when we talk about quality versus maturity. So when you have your retrieval, there's an embryologist, the scientist who basically looks through a microscope and sees which of your eggs have reached, and they call it, maturity level 1. They have a scale that they use. This is the closest thing that they have to identifying eggs that have undergone the full chromosomal processing, which is, just because it's reached a certain size and has certain attributes, they can say this one has a high propensity to be quality. However, what's really important to acknowledge is that there is a big difference between, or a very important difference between maturity and quality, because there is no test out there right now that can test the quality of an egg. They can only test the quality of an embryo. So that's basically an egg once it's been fertilized. So it is a little bit of a challenge, even more of a risk, and even more of a sort of, being setting expectations with yourself, because just because you retrieve a certain number of mature eggs, that doesn't necessarily mean that they are quality. However, it is a sign, it's a good sign that they're pointed in that direction.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's why it's good to just go in with that mindset of every egg you get is a plus. Every egg you get is a bonus, and it's giving you more frozen than if you hadn't have done it at all. Right. So even if you only get one egg, you're getting more of a shot in the future than you would otherwise have. Mm-hmm. So just kind of, I really like that.
Takes one.
Yeah, it only takes one. That's what we say.
It only takes one.
Yeah. Catherine, maybe we should talk about, or maybe you could help tell us about some of the reasons we all froze, or talking about reasons that women do want to freeze their eggs.
Yeah, we get this, so much, because people, it's really strange. People aren't always totally cognizant of their own motivations for doing it. And actually, when I look back, I'm not sure I necessarily was. I just it was something that I'd heard about and felt would be good at that point in my life, after a breakup, in my 30s. And when you start kind of digging down into other women's reasons for doing it, it can actually illuminate some of your own a bit more and kind of help you feel a bit more in control of your own decision. And so really there's 3 main reasons why someone might freeze their eggs. And the first one is just simply, it's not the right time to have a child. It's not the right time to start a family or to have another child. And that can be for many different reasons. It could be because somebody hasn't found the right life partner yet and they want to become a mother in a partnership. It could be because of career and life demands. It could be because of career reasons. It could be because of geography. So that's a kind of a big one. It's just not the right time.
And just, in doing our research, what I thought was so interesting is that we started to look at, egg freezing is almost just a reflection of what is shifts happening in society. Men and women are waiting longer and longer to have children, and we have to be making money longer. It's not about I think there's this misconception that women who freeze their eggs are power hungry businesswomen, but some of us are just trying to make it by, get by and have a career that we can feed us. You know what I mean? So I think there's an expectation that people settle down later, and that's both men and women, and our lifespans have increased. But I think the challenge, and I think what is, we joke about Mother Nature not being a feminist. Our lives are longer, we are waiting longer to settle down. However, our biological clocks are just the same as they were when we were, Neanderthals. So, anyway, I always find that be interesting, kind of, it is sort of tapping into what's happening on a large systemic level.
Totally. And absolutely, to your point there, even though the vast majority of women in that situation who are freezing their eggs for that reason are single, actually more and more women who are in relationships are also freezing their eggs. So it's actually not a particularly clear equation.
Yeah, on Eggsperience.com, I have so many women that either got out of a marriage or a relationship or in a relationship and just not ready for that kid, situation. And so they're extending the biological clock by freezing. And it's a really great option. It's really the best technology we have today to extend our biological clock and keep up with the men's ability to have children. And so I think this has been such a great discussion, ladies. I don't know if you have any final thoughts before we wrap up today.
Well, just quickly on the other 2 reasons there. So the first reason, it's not the right time to have a child. Second reason could be medical issues. So if somebody has endometriosis, or perhaps if they're going through a medical treatment like chemotherapy that could compromise their future fertility. And then thirdly, which is quite relevant for right now, people who are facing a potentially dangerous situation in life. So somebody who is in the army and they're being deployed, but currently, COVID-19, big health crises and fears circulating about fertility are causing a few people to think about their fertility in that regard too, and men as well with sperm freezing. Apparently there's been a huge uptick in at-home sperm freezing kit sales. So yeah, those three reasons.
Well, we just need to start with getting our AMH tested and seeing our fertility doctor for our scans and antral follicle count, and then deciding if it's right for you. Personally, it's a very individual personal choice. But we're all egg freezers, and so we want to support everybody that's out there thinking about egg freezing, especially during this crisis time of the COVID virus.
Yeah, get in touch with us anytime with any question. No question is too silly.
Yeah.
Say such thing.
Well, this has been so much fun, ladies. Thanks so much for just joining us, and we will make sure we keep track of everything in the comments below, and help reach out to us if you have any individual questions you want answered from either Catherine or Brittany or myself. We're more than willing to give you our opinion, thoughts, and guides on everything that we learned during the process.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, everyone. Stay safe.